extraordinary event happened in that 32-day period that made you change the core values you had expressed for the preceding 12 years?
Senator, again, I very much appreciate you bringing up my comments from 2013, because for me, this issue has always been about standards. And unfortunately, because of some of the people that have been in political power for the last 4 years, priorities other than standards, lethality, and meritocracy have driven decision-making.
I'm quoting you from the podcast. Women shouldn't be in combat at all. Where is the reference to standards, that they should be there if they can carry, if they can run? I don't see that at all, Mr. Hegseth. What I see is that there's a 32-day period in which you suddenly have another description about your views of women in the military. And I just want to know, what changed in the 32 days that the song you sang is not the song you come in here today to sing?
Senator, the concerns I have and the concerns of many have had, especially in ground combat units, is that in pursuit of certain percentages or quotas, standards have been changed. And that makes the combat more difficult for everybody involved.
Let me make a suggestion about what happened in that 32 days. You got a nomination from President Trump. Now, I've heard of deathbed conversions, but this is the first time I've heard of a nomination conversion. And I hope you understand that many women serving in the military right now might think that if you can convert so rapidly your long-held and aggressively pursued views in just 32 days, that 32 days after you get confirmed, maybe you'll just reverse those views and go back to the old guy who said straight up, women do not belong in combat. Now, Mr. Hegseth, you have written that after they retire, generals should be banned from working for the defense industry for 10 years. You and I agree on the corrosive effects of the revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors. It's something I would have liked to talk with you about if you'd come and been willing to visit with me. But the question I have for you on this is, will you put your money where your mouth is and agree that when you leave this job, you will not work for the defense industry for 10 years?
Senator, it's not even a question I've thought about, because it's not
about it right now.
It's not one, my motivation for this job.
I understand that. I just need a yes or no here.
Come next.
Time is short. I just need a yes or no.
I would consult with the president about what the policy should be at the Defense Department.
In other words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years, but you're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
You'll be the one, let us just be clear, in charge of the generals. So you're saying sauce for the goose, but certainly not sauce for the gander?
I would want to see what the policy of the president is.
Oh, I'll bet you would.
These are the requirements today for people serving in the industry, men and women. They are gender neutral, and they are very difficult to meet. They have not been reduced in any way, and our combat units, our infantry is lethal. So please explain specifically, because you will be in charge of 3 million personnel. It is a big job. And when you make these public statements, and I get you were not Secretary of Defense then, I get you were on TV, I get you were helping veterans, I get it was a different job. But most recently, you said this in November of 2024, knowing full well you might have been named as Secretary of Defense. So please explain these types of statements, because they're brutal and they're mean and they disrespect men and women who are willing to die for this country.
Well, Senator, I appreciate your comments. And I would point out, I've never disparaged women serving in the military. I respect every single female service member that has put on the uniform, past and present. My critiques, Senator, recently and in the past, and from personal experience, have been instances where I've seen standards lowered, and you mentioned 11 Alpha, 11 Bravo, MOS, places in units, and the book that has been referenced multiple times here, The War on Warriors. I spent months talking to active duty service members, men and women, low ranks, high ranks, combat arms and not combat arms. And what each and every one of them told me, and which personal instances have shown me, is that in ways direct, indirect, overt, and subtle, standards have been changed inside infantry training units, ranger school, infantry battalions, to ensure that
Give me one example. Please give me an example. I get you're making these generalized
meet
statements.
quotas to have a certain number of female infantry officers or infantry enlisted, and that disparages those women
Commanders
who are
do
incredibly
not have to
capable
be
of meeting
quotas
that
for the
standard.
infantry. Commanders do not have to have a quota for women in the infantry. That does not exist. It does not exist. And your statements are creating the impression that these exist, because they do not. There are not quotas. We want the most lethal force. But I'm telling you, having been here for 15 years, listening to testimony about men and women in combat and the type of operations that were successful in Afghanistan and in Iraq, women were essential for many of those units. When Ranger units went in to find where the terrorists hiding in Afghanistan or in Iraq, if they had a woman in the unit, they could go in, talk to the women in a village, say, where are the terrorists hiding? Where are the weapons hiding? And get crucial information to make sure that we can win that battle. So you cannot denigrate women in general, and your statements do that. We don't want women in the military, especially in combat. What a terrible statement. So please, do not deny that you've made those statements. You have. We take the responsibility of standards very seriously, and we will work with you. I'm equally distressed you would not meet with me before this hearing. We could have covered all of this before you came here, so I could get to the 15 other questions that I want to get to. So women, you have denigrated. You have also denigrated members of the LGBTQ community. Did you know that when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in place, we lost so many crucial personnel, over 1,000 in mission-critical areas. We lost 10% of all our foreign language speakers because of a political policy. You said in your statement, you don't want politics in the DOD. Everything you've said in these public statements is politics. I don't want women. I don't want moms. What's wrong with a mom, by the way? Once you have babies, you therefore are no longer able to be lethal. I mean, you're basically saying women, after they have children, can't ever serve in the military in a combat role. It's a silly thing to say. It's a silly thing to say, beneath the position that you are aspiring to. To denigrate LGBTQ service members is a mistake. If you are a sharpshooter, you're as lethal regardless of what your gender identity is, regardless of who you love.
What is the highest level of international security agreement that you have led? And can you name some that the Secretary of Defense would lead? There's three main ones. Do you know?
I have not been involved in international security arrangements because I have not been in government other than serving in the military. So my job has been to
no, the answer is no. Can you name one of the three main ones that the Secretary of Defense
signs? You're talking about defense arrangements. I mean, NATO might be one that you're referring to.
Status of Forces Agreement would be one of them.
Status of Forces Agreement. I've been a part of teaching about Status of Forces Agreements.
But you don't remember to
Afghanistan.
mention it? You're not qualified, Mr. Hegseth. You're not qualified. You talk about repairing our defense industrial complex. You're not qualified to that. You could do acquisition and cross-servicing agreements, which essentially are security agreements. You can't even mention that. You've done none of those. You talked about the Indo-Pacific a little bit, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. Can you name the importance of at least one of the nations in the ASEAN, and what type of agreement we have with at least one of those nations? And how many nations are in ASEAN, by the way?
I couldn't tell you the exact amount of nations in that, but I know we have allies in South Korea and Japan and in AUKUS with Australia, and trying to work on submarines with them.
Mr. Hegseth, none of those countries are in ASEAN.
Across.
None of those three countries that you've mentioned are in ASEAN. I suggest you do a little homework before you prepare for these types of negotiations. Listen, Mr. Hegseth, we ask our troops to go into harm's way all the time. We ask them to go into harm's way. And this behind me is a copy of the Soldier's Creed, a copy that usually hangs over my desk here in the Senate, and you should be familiar with it. It's the same copy that hung over my desk at Walter Reed every single day that I woke up and fought my way back because I wanted to go back and serve next to my buddies who'd saved my life. This same copy, these words are repeated over and over and over again. And let me read out two things to you, two sentences. I will always place the mission first, and I am disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained and proficient in my warrior task. Mr. Hegseth, our troops follow these words every single day, and they man up and they pack their rucksacks and they go to war. And they deserve a leader who can lead them, not a leader who wants to lower the standards for himself or raising the standards for other people. And by the way, our troops already meet the standards. We ask troops to man that ship, fight that fire, fly that helicopter until their very last breath. And they do that every single day. They cannot be led by someone who's not competent to do the job. How can we ask these warriors to train and perform the absolute highest standards when you are asking us to lower the standards to make you the Secretary of Defense simply because you are buddies with our president-elect? And by the way, he has filed for bankruptcy 6 times. I'm not quite sure he's the kind of CEO you want to refer to as a successful businessman. Let me make it clear. You can't seem to grasp that there is no U.S. military as we know it without the incredible women that we serve. Women who've earned their place in their units. You have not earned your place as Secretary of Defense. You say you care about keeping our armed forces strong and that you like that our armed forces are meritocracy, then let's not lower the standards for you. You, sir, are a no-go at this station.
Do you think this is appropriate behavior for a leader?
Senator, the overwhelming majority of anyone who's worked for me, including the on-the-record statements that have been submitted to this, with their name on it, on the record, men and women who worked with me every day, are the overwhelming preponderance of evidence that testify to my leadership and professionalism in leading Vets for Freedom and Concerned Veterans for America. My
Okay.
leadership has been completely impugned on these veterans organizations that did fantastic work.
Mr.
on behalf
Hegseth,
of the
I'm not
men
even
and
going to
women
go
fighting
into the-
overseas
I'm not even
and
going to go into
advocating,
the
and we manage our
accusations.
financial books with integrity across the board. How many people, everybody who runs a campaign.
I have limited time. I'm not going to get into the accusations that come from Fox News. Now you have some of your Fox News colleagues here. There were multiple instances of accusations against you about drinking on the job.
All
coming
anonymous,
in.
all false, all refuted by my colleagues who I worked with for 10 years at 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. and everything
The
in
challenge here for me,
between, and
Mr.
said
Hegseth,
they've only seen me be professional
is when there is
every
discussion
single time.
about personal challenges, and you admittedly had issues with heavy drinking. It's hard to kind of square this, to square the circle here. It's kind of a difficult thing to do. Let me ask you, if I have about 90 seconds left here, which is it? Have you overcome personal issues, or are you the target of a smear campaign? It can't be both. It's clear to me that you're not being honest with us or the American people because you know the truth would disqualify you from getting the job. And just as concerning as each of these specific disqualifying accusations are, what concerns me just as much is the idea of having a Secretary of Defense who is not transparent.
I'm not going to put words in the mouth of Secretary Esper or anybody else. from
He
this
said them
podium.
himself. You don't have to. What are you scared of? Did he do the right thing by apologizing?
I'm not scared of anything, Senator.
Then say
I'm
yes or no.
interested
You
in
can say no.
upholding the laws and the Constitution
Okay.
in any
So
particular
Donald
scenario.
Trump asked for the active duty 82nd Airborne to be deployed during that same time. Secretary Esper has written that he convinced him against that decision. If Donald Trump asked you to use the 82nd Airborne in law enforcement roles in Washington, D.C., would you also convince him otherwise?
I'm not going to get ahead of conversations I would have with the president. However, there are laws and processes inside our Constitution that would be followed.
President Trump said in November that he is willing to consider using the active duty military against the, quote, enemy within. Have you been personally involved in discussions of using the U.S. military active duty inside the United States?
Senator, I'm glad we finally got to the topic of border security equaling national security because it's been abdicated and ignored for the last 4 years.
That wasn't my question. I'm just asking, have you been involved? You're about to be the Secretary of Defense potentially. Have you been involved in discussions about using the active duty military inside the United States?
Senator, I am not yet the Secretary of Defense.
Right. I'm
If
just
confirmed, I would be party to any number of
So you
conversations.
haven't been in any of these
which I would not
conversations?
reveal what I have discussed with the President of the United States
Just
or
have
not.
you been in conversations? You're going to be in charge of 3 million people, the active duty that I know you care about, I believe you care about. So have you been in conversations about using the active duty in any way? whether it's setting up in detention camps, policing dangerous cities. Have you been involved in any of those conversations?
Certainly, I have been involved in conversations relating to doing things this administration has not, which is secure the southern border and not allow floods of illegals
So
to
are
enter
you-
our country
so-
through an invasion
Okay.
that threatens the American people.
Okay,
And there
I
are
got
ways
it.
in which the military is already playing a role in that, to include 5,000
Do
National
you
Guardsmen from
believe
Indiana and
that the
Texas.
US
We're at the border right now, allowing for border
Will
security.
you
So there is
ask the
plenty of
active
precedent
duty
for
military to
members
staff
enforcing
detention
our southern
centers?
border.
And then when we start talking about qualifications for if you're qualified for it, could the chairman tell me what the qualifications are for the Secretary of Defense? Mr. Chairman, could you tell me what the qualifications are for the Secretary of Defense?
I'd be happy for
I'll read it.
for you to do
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
let me read it for you, because I Googled
I
it.
was getting some advice from
I
my
understand
second
that.
in command.
Yeah, but I'm just making a point, because there's a lot about qualifications, and I think it's so hypocritical of senators, especially on the other side of the aisle, be talking about his qualifications, not being able to lead the secretary or be the Secretary of Defense, and yet your qualifications aren't any better. You guys aren't any more qualified to be the senator than I'm qualified to be the senator, except we're lucky enough to be here. But let me read you what the qualifications of the Secretary of Defense is, because I Googled it, and went through a lot of different sites, and really it's hard to see. But in general, the U.S. Secretary of Defense position is filled by a civilian. That's it. If you have served in the U.S. Army Forces and have been in the service for, you have to be retired for at least 7 years, and Congress can weigh that. And then there's questions that the senator from Massachusetts brought up about serving on a board inside the military industry, and yet your own secretary that you all voted for, Secretary Austin, we had to vote on a waiver because he stepped off the board of Raytheon. But I guess that's okay, because that's a Democrat Secretary of Defense. But you so quickly forget about that. And then Senator Kaine, or I guess I better use the senator from Virginia, starts bringing up the fact that what if you showed up drunk to your job? How many senators have showed up drunk to vote at night? Have any of you guys asked them to step down and resign from their job? And don't tell me you haven't seen it, because I know you have. And then how many senators do you know have got a divorce before cheating on their wives? Did you ask them to step down? No. But it's for show. You guys make sure you make a big show and point out the hypocrisy because a man's made a mistake. And you want to sit there and say that he's not qualified? Give me a joke. I mean, it is so ridiculous that you guys hold yourself as this higher standard and you forget you got a big plank in your eye. We've all made mistakes. I've made mistakes. And Jennifer, thank you for loving him through that mistake. Because the only reason why I'm here and not in prison is because my wife loved me too. I have changed, but I'm not perfect. But I found somebody that thought I was perfect. And for whatever reason, you love Pete, and I don't know why. But just like our Lord and Savior forgave me, my wife's had to forgive me more than once too, and I'm sure you've had to forgive him too. And so thank you. So before I go down this rabbit hole again, tell me something about your wife that you love.
She's the smartest, most capable, loving, humble, honest person I've ever met. In addition to being incredibly beautiful. Don't forget about your kids. I'm supposed to talk about my kids?
No, well, she's also the mother.
Oh, an amazing mother.
Yes.
Of our
Yes.
blended family of 7 kids.
Brother, I'm
all
pulling
of
you
which
as long.
love her.
I'm trying to help you here. You know, do you believe that you're going to be running the Secretary or the Department of Defense by yourself?
Senator, absolutely not. Just as President Trump is assembling his cabinet, I look forward and already am in the process of building one of the best possible teams you can imagine, with decades and decades of experience outside of the Pentagon, driving innovation and excellence, and also inside the building, knowing how to make it happen. Yes, sir.
So In your organizations that you did have the privilege of running, did you have a board that you?
In both organizations, we had a board, yes.
Okay, and what did you do with that board? What kind of decisions did you make with them?
Those boards provided oversight and insight into decision-making.
They all have special, unique sets that maybe filled gaps that you're not the expertise in?
Yes, sir.
So do you believe you're capable of surrounding yourself with capable individuals that you're going to be able to run those same ideas by and surround yourself with people that are smarter and better equipped in maybe areas that you don't necessarily carry those expertise with?
Senator, the only reason I've had success in life, to include my wonderful wife, is because of people more capable around me and having the self-confidence to empower them and say, hey, run with the ball, run with the football, take it down the field. We'll do this together. I don't care who gets the credit. And in this case, that's how the Pentagon will be run.
Let's end with this, Mr. Chairman, about the qualifications. You got a man who has literally put his butt on the line, who served 20 years in the service, multiple deployments, has heard the bullets crack over the top of his head, has been willing to go into combat, been willing to see friends die for this country. And he's willing to still put himself through this. His wife is willing to still stand beside him, knowing he wasn't perfect, knowing that all this was going to be brought up, and he's still willing to serve the country. What other qualifications does he need?
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.